Hey, how's everybody doing? It took me a while to finally get around to doing this, but I'm doing it now because I needed something. I needed to gather my thoughts, is what I had to do. Will probably be my last one unedited. The next video I do is hopefully be a bit more visually exciting while I go back to editing again. But yes, I finally saw, or I saw it the weekend it came out, the Beatles, 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, the Ron Howard documentary. And I gotta tell you, I loved it. I loved it. What did you think? I was going to say anything else? Of course I loved it. I was getting a bit skeptical by certain things that I saw online, but you need to realize quickly that what people say online sometimes is not true. You have to experience it yourself. I will say that when I first heard that Ron Howard was directing the documentary, I did scratch my head. Although I think that Ron Howard is a fantastic filmmaker. I've loved quite a lot of his movies, going back to Splash. And it's always amazing to me somebody like Ron Howard as a director, just as a filmmaker, how he's done so many different films. He really has. There's a criticism that somebody else had up on a review of 8 Days a Week, saying that Ron Howard's an inconsistent filmmaker. And by inconsistent, they meant that how does one go from Apollo 13 to How the Grinch Stole Christmas to the Da Vinci Code films to Frost Nixon, going all the way back to Splash. But even then, you had Splash going to Cocoon, going to Gung Ho, going to Willow, which I think was more of a Lucas film than his, but and then from that to Parenthood. So he has said that specifically a long time ago, that he did not want to be known as for doing a Ron Howard type of film. And this is his second documentary. The first one was Made in America, about Jay-Z's Made in America festival, which actually got me to respect Jay-Z a bit more. Now, let's talk about 8 Days a Week. He actually takes you inside the madness. He really does. Inside and outside. There's not a lot of big revelations in here that you didn't get from the anthology. I think as far as Beatle fans go, I think we know a lot of things. There's certain omissions people were talking about, like somebody was talking about how John Lennon said that 1964 U.S. tour was like Satyricon, Fellini's Satyricon. So I'm sure some people were expecting some anecdotes about backstage groupies and things like that, and nobody talked about how Bob Dylan turned them on to marijuana. But I think we've all known that story, and nobody talked about in somewhere in 1965 how John and George's dentist gave them special coffee. But I don't think any of that actually matters in the context of this film. He brings you in, and I was scratching my head when I was seeing a lot of the footage. We can talk about, like I said before, Bieber Fever, and whenever a teen group comes out with Screaming Girls. This was something different. This was like, it was a riot. I didn't know all these stories about fans rushing the stage or coming near to a riot in 1966 when they had a sound system problem. The performances are excellent in the film. I'm seeing footage that I haven't seen before, and some footage was provided by the fans. And I like the personal stories. Some people, including myself, was like, why is Whoopi Goldberg in here? What does she have to add to this? Her Shea Stadium story had my wife in tears. Really had my wife in tears. My favorite moment was that Dr. Kitty Oliver, her recollection, was probably the most poignant. And seeing that story that the Beatles refused to play to segregated audiences was powerful. When Larry Kane starts talking, that film takes off, and he really puts it in a historical context with Beatlemania and what was happening at the times. He really puts it into a historical context. The sound for the film was great. The picture was great. The editing when the Beatles are touring in that touring mode, it reminded me of the famous sequence in Goodfellas, with Scorsese's Goodfellas, with the last day in the Mafia, Scorsese calls it, where Henry Hill is stirring the pasta sauce and helicopters are flying outside and he's doing cocaine and he has to sell the guns and he has to pick his brother up and he's got to get the package all ready for delivery. The editing is very fast. The movie is very fast paced. In fact, the film was so overwhelming for me that when I found out Hulu was playing it, when I got home from the theater, I watched it on Hulu back to back. And the same overwhelming feeling happened when I watched it again. So, I can't, Ron Howard did his job and he really told this story. He's saying he wants to do another one and it does set it up for a sequel. It really does. You could delve into the studio years, but even in this film, watching it, you can tell why the Beatles wanted to give up touring, and you can even tell why the Beatles eventually broke up. It's there, especially when they talk about that gap in 1966. Now, my film also had the Shea Stadium concert as well. My film, when I saw it, it also had Shea Stadium. I liked the restoration. I think I would have wished they released the whole Shea Stadium film with the backstage interviews of the Beatles and the opening acts. The sound, some people were actually disappointed in it. I don't know if I was disappointed in it. I was just confused by it because the performances, I would have liked the raw performances. But I'm here, you know, as other people had discussed, I'm hearing a weird, doctored, some studio additions. Some I just spotted directly from the original recordings. Some of it I heard from the original live Shea Stadium. And they did some doctoring work at the time on it. So I'm hearing a weird concoction of things happening there. It's good to have it out. It's good to have it. That picture's restored, whatever they can do with it. I wish they didn't doctor the sound. But in the whole scheme of things, that is minor. It really is in the Beatle world, because it's good to have this stuff out in one shape or form or another. So, 8 days a week. If you haven't seen it, they extended the theatrical run. I don't know how long they extended it to, but I don't think they expected the theatrical run to take off. The theater was crowded when we saw it. It was packed. It was packed, and it was only showing on one theater out here in Phoenix. At least I believe. I know the Harkins chain is where I saw it. I saw it at a Harkins theater. So, if you haven't seen it, go see it. Get the Blu-ray when it comes out. Ron Howard did an excellent job. I'm looking forward to a part 2. And thank you all for subscribing to me. Please spread the word. I think I'm up to 115 subscribers. So thank you. Thank you all so much for sticking with me. Some of the loyal people who comment. Joe and Clarence. A bunch of you guys. And thank you for sticking with me. Please stick around, and there's more to come. And I think the next one I'm going to do may be a classic album one again, and I'll probably do some fun editing with that as much as I can on iMovie, because iMovie is rather out of date. But that's all I have at the moment. So thank you for sticking with me. Have a great day and a great week.